So today we're going to be talking about neurodiversity for all, and specifically in the workplace. And I've invited Alex to show her work as an example of something that's really sensible to how people feel in a space, which I believe can help with stopping people with disabilities feeling disabled in certain spaces. So the Flower Umbrella is this charity we're trying to start, and it's focused on gaining expertise in technology and sustainable practices, gaining experience, neurodiversity, and experimental practices. And so today we're going to be showing neurodiversity we're going to be talking about neurodiversity. So the concept of the charity also goes through research, innovation, sensibility, and expertise. And so today we will be looking at sensibility. So I wanted to ask everybody what they think is neurodiversity for them. What does it mean? Or if you have a concept of your own for what is neurodiversity. Does anyone want to talk a bit about what they think neurodiversity is?
Well, I think I can share based off conversations that we've had, where I used to think of neurodiversity more as, very specific disabilities. So whether it's like autism or ADHD, but from what we've talked about, we can also look at neurodiversity as like a bigger spectrum that affects us all. And we're all, as humans, like very sensitive to environment, the things that, people that we would say might have a disability, like we're all sensitive to the same things. It's just in varying degrees.
Yes, that's very good. That's really nicely put. And that was actually the original concept of neurodiversity. So neurodiversity is a subset of biodiversity. And it was coined by Judy Singer in the late 80s, early 90s. And everybody is affected by it. Everybody's neurodiverse. Then we can look at neurominorities, so people who have specific neurodivergent traits. But if you go down that stream of thought, you can also think about people who are both neurodivergent and neurotypical, who will have traits from both sides. And often this duality can erase a bit of the concept of neurodiversity being for all. And that's what I'm trying to raise awareness about as well. So what is neurodiversity according to Judy Singer? Is a state of nature to be respected, an analytical tool for examining social issues, and an argument for the conversation and facilitation of human diversity. And so today we will be focusing on the facilitation of human diversity through spatial design. Neurodiversity is not a synonym of neurological disorder. So basically, if you are reading this, you are creating the future of what neurodiversity is, because it's up to us all to include people and to redefine what neurodiversity can be. So in terms of the flower umbrella, we sit in between neurodiversity, sustainability, and technology. So we are looking at how these aspects intersect with each other, but also we look at the aspects individually. And today it's mostly about neurodiversity. So we come to the question, how to facilitate human diversity in society. And I think the answer to this is through sensibility in spatial practices and spatial design, which is why I invited Alex to present her work today. But generally, we work with these sets of senses: sound, touch, smell, taste, sight, and then internal senses. These are the external senses, and then internal senses, which refer to the interoception, proprioception, and vestibular. And there's actually a report done by the National Development Team for Inclusion, which you can find on this link, and I will post the link on the chat as well. me just... Oh, I will post the link on the chat in a bit while Alex is presenting. But it really comes down to thinking about how sensitive you are to noise, how sensitive you are to smell, how sensitive you are to lighting conditions like color, to people passing by, how sensitive you could be to foods and things like caffeine or gluten, and how sensitive you are to touch. These all influence how you perceive space and also how the space around you affects you. And so that's why I invited Alex today to show her work, because I think it's a very good example of a sensible type of design for people, to give people a regenerative experience, how you explained it. So yeah, I'm gonna stop sharing. How do I stop sharing? Stop share. And I'm gonna leave Alex to show her work.
Hey, thank you, Louisa. That was a really great introduction to the topic. And for me, it was really interesting to be asked to, or like from the conversations that we've had on this topic, to see how my work actually fits in with the topic of neurodiversity in a way that I hadn't actually thought about before we started having conversations about it. So I'm going to share my screen. And just do a little presentation on and a little bit about me. So let's just play it from here. Okay, can everyone see that all right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm Ali, and I'm a visual artist and a designer. So my background is in fine art and a bit later on in spatial design. And I also did a brief stint at the Bauhaus School of Architecture and Design for a semester. And in between two periods of creative study, I also spent quite a bit of time in the health industry. I'm a qualified movement and strength coach and also a level 1 health coach. And I think that my experience in this industry actually continues to influence the way I think about design, in particularly spatial design, thinking about our bodies, how they respond to spaces, and sort of health and wellness in general in terms of environment. So some of my research topics. So firstly, looking at the powerful link between our physical space and our psychological space, and what the instigator for this investigation was for me was COVID. So when we all found ourselves in these spaces, however big, however small, I think it became really prevalent for everyone, like just how much our environments can affect us, whether it be in a positive way or a negative way. They can fuel us, they can suppress us. And I think it really highlighted just how sensitive we are as humans to things like light, noise, materials, textures. And that's kind of irrespective of whether you're someone that is suffering from ADHD or autism, for example. That is just everyone as people. So the second point of conversation or my research are specifically immersive experience as a way of self-regulating, and how they can generate inward connected and specifically slow experiences. So that sort of feeling of sort of parasympathetic slowing down and reconnecting. And so in terms of creating sensory environments, I'm looking at how our environments are perceived and then how they get translated into sensations and feelings in our bodies. And finally, I've looked quite closely at the experiential value of natural phenomena. So light, water, their power as creative tools, and questioning sort of why they're so experiential for us as humans. So this was my biggest research project, which is called the Kairos Chamber, a place of pause. This is my master's work. And so this is the research that explores this. And really what this was about creating a very particular spatial experience. And I wanted to explain briefly what kairos actually is. Kairos is a beautiful expression that was coined by the ancient Greeks, so they actually differentiated between two different types of time. They had chronos and they had kairos. So you can think of chronos as measured time, basically. So anything, like a clock, a calendar, the way we understand time. But then they also describe a type of time called kairos, which is this sort of deep experiential type of time where you become very centered within yourself, and the sort of outside world becomes less prevalent and you become more focused. And I just thought this was so beautiful. So I went in search of this experience. And through a very big exploration of London's hidden water network, I ended up discovering an ancient site, which was a bathhouse, this like very beautiful 17th century forgotten space, which was essentially just a pool of water with one window. And I went on a big investigation about exactly what the type of experience or qualities that this place had. So it's quite tricky for me actually to know which part of the project to show you, because there's lots of videos, there's lots of materials, which I can send on afterwards. But I wanted to share what we could watch it together. On this slide is a video of one part of the project, which is about sensory experiments within the space. So I'm going to play it now, and I hope you all enjoy it. So within the experiments, what we've been trying to do is to replicate as closely as possible this feeling of basking in this very soft, warm glow of natural light. And that's actually really hard to do artificially, and it's really hard to translate this natural phenomena into a fabricated context. But we wanted to get as close to that as possible. So by exploring the color spectrum and the sunlight spectrum, which takes you from like a white blue light in the morning all the way through to a warmer yellows and ambers and oranges as the sun sets. We've explored all those different colors and how emulating within a spatial context can change the feeling that you get from a space. Focus in on all these elements of the space as separate entities. So the sound, the light, the water, the movement of reflection on the wall. When you assimilate them all back together, you create an incredibly immersive thing. And when you create an immersive space, you in turn create an immersive feeling for whoever is using that space. But it's about capturing these very small elements to create focus points for attention and designing them in a way that creates slowness within a space.
That's great.
Thank you. Okay, so you obviously have seen from the video, like there's quite a lot of like powerful, like visuals with the water, with the lights, like some is very bright, some is, quite intense patterns. So for the purpose of that project, that's where the explorations got to. But I think the interesting question is, how do you take something like that, which is deliberately designed to be quite an intense immersive experience, but what elements can you take from that and sort of instill in our more regular everyday environment, so our homes, our workplaces, and why, so how can things like color, water, more experiential things be more normal or integrated into those environments. So next is taking the research out of an experimental phase and applying a higher level of technicality with the design, and thinking about integrating this type of thing into our everyday spaces, and also working alongside anyone that's interested in the same topics.
Yeah, that was really good. Thank you.
So that is everything. I share.
Yeah, so I posted the housing paper. So the paper about adapting spaces for autistic people and considering more of the senses that we looked at before. And they have specific guidelines for each one of the senses. So I think that would be great if you wanted to have a read. It's on the chat, but I will also post a link on LinkedIn and across social media for it so that everyone has access to it. And I think moving forward, it would be a bit about raising awareness about these issues with architects, and also promoting things such as neurodiversity in the workplace, because the type of design, how you design a classroom environment or how you design a workspace environment, can really determine how people are feeling in that environment and how well appropriate they are fit to work. And we can see things like noise canceling headphones as actually enablers. So small things can make a big difference, but it's also about negotiating between different sensory types. So for someone on the autistic spectrum, they might have a specific sensory type. They might be very sensitive to noise, and it might have to have a clash with someone who's not as sensitive to noise and actually needs stimulation from the environment. So it's all about negotiating between these different sensory profiles and making sure that things are as diverse as possible and adaptable, because whichever occupier is within that space, you can actually allow the occupier to manipulate the space around and to help them adopt the special qualities that they want in that space. So, for example, for my master's part 2, I developed a concept of lighting that could be controlled by an app on the phone. And this was mostly because I was working at the time with an epileptic, and they actually made me realize a lot of the problems with lighting and patterning in working environments and even at home. So if you give the user more control of the space, you can actually allow the user to manipulate the space around them. So I think that question of giving users the ability to manipulate the space around them, is really important. But also, given the umbrella factor, if we design public spaces or spaces that are collective to all, with this in mind and with the sort of aspects you've elevated in your work, which clearly has connections to health and well-being, I think that's the really important part to take on. And I'm hoping that today was a good start to the conversation. I will definitely send the video link to those who weren't present, but who did say they wanted to come to the event. And because unfortunately we had some technical issues with Wix, but we'll definitely forward you the link today, and also the resources that I mentioned from the National Team for Diversity and Inclusion. Yeah. And thank you all so much for coming. I think that's it. We only have a couple more minutes, so if anyone wants to introduce themselves and give us a bit about feedback or what you thought about the presentation, how it could be integrated in architecture, or how it could be integrated in other practices. I mean, being an architect, I think about it from a spatial perspective, but there's other models of disability and other models for neurodiversity. So you could consider the medical model as well as the social model. But what I'm trying to get at with this presentation is to make the case for spatial design to be enabling people instead of disabling them. And that works at a subconscious level where the architect and all the people involved, the consultant, have to be aware of these differences in the population, which is why I introduced the neurodiversity concept. And more so than as a neurological disorder, of course, we have to pay attention to neurodivergence and to neurological disorders that might have extra affects to the spatial qualities, but we also have to consider the entire population. So it's about how we negotiate sensory profiles within spaces, specifically within public space and within shared spaces. So yeah, if anyone has anything they'd like to share or what they thought about the presentation, is it aligned to what you agree with, or do you think you might integrate it within your research? And yeah, feel free to share your thoughts. We have a couple more minutes. We have like 5 or 10 more minutes.
I think for me, it's just like fascinating to think about the future of what like a truly human responsive space is, like how far that could go.
Mm-hmm.
I see it as a place with so much potential.
Yeah.
I had a question in regard to like kind of marrying architectural design and kind of well-being, and I wanted to ask Alex, what's like your future plans for your like how do you see your project evolving and maybe being adapted by healthcare professionals, or I don't know, social housing or something like that, or for assisted homes, etc.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to think about different contexts where my type of work could fit. I think initially to be honest, the initial ideas for expanding the project were about specific places for sensory experience. So whether they are like in particularly like busy areas of the city where there's a lot of people moving at very high speed and they need a specific environment to come in and slow down, or if it was more about the visuals, that could even be developed into like a VR experience that you could have access to wherever you were. But then, yeah, it's something to be explored more. I think I've always thought it could have a place in residential, in our home environments. Looking at, I think your home is somewhere where you come to and you want to feel at home, you want to unwind, you want to relax, and I think you can develop different mechanisms, especially with lighting, for that to take place. But yeah, I would love any feedback if anyone has any other ideas about where it might.
Yeah, I think I actually have some feedback for that, because I think this integration of lighting conditions is so important. And I think one of the things to look at is part M of building codes and regulations. So what would part M look like if there were a set of guidelines for lighting, for example? Because at the moment, it's all very much about mobility and about, obviously it's necessary, but we want to build up on that. And I think I'm in touch with someone at this, it's called Neurodiverse Connection, and they are spatial designers that are specializing in neurodiversity and autistic adaptations. And they do consultancy, and I think the lead writer for the paper I sent is there. So it would be a great point of connection that I can put you in touch with, hopefully introduce you over email and show her your work, show there your work. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think my work, you know, it does come from quite an artistic perspective, and I think it's something that could be really expanded with the help of people that have a lot more technical understanding of, you know, architectural design, lighting design, that kind of thing. So I'd be really interested to connect with more people.
Yeah,
working on
I'll put you in touch, and definitely look at part M and see how your work would change part M of building codes and regulations. Because I think we also have to operate at the law level, not just at the awareness level and subconscious level that people who are designing have. And generally we can hope for acceptance from them. But I think if there are things in place that have to be managed and changed through regulations, then it's a good beginning as well. So I think the part-time needs to be revisited, as well as the Equality Act, but that's a talk for another time, I guess. But yeah, thank you so much for everyone who came today, and I will publish this video so that everyone has access. And if you have any views you'd like to share or comments, you feel free to contact me. And I hope this was a good experience to connect people and to understand what neurodiversity is and how it can be applied to spatial environments. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks, Louisa.
Thank you.
Thank you, Arwa. Thank you. Bye.